truly love your parents, your sisters, your best friends, please stick to the rules.
Tonight, breaking news, millions of Sydney-siders still under tough restrictions as COVID cases continue to rise. Gladys Berejiklian warning that unless vaccination rates improve, thousands of people will be hospitalised and potentially die. It's Sunday the 11th of July. You're watching 6 News also tonight.
There's not a country in the world other than Israel that has a vaccination rate of 2 doses more than 65%. Israel is the only country in the world that has that.
International travellers arriving in Australia to be asked which vaccine they have received and where they were given it as a new campaign to get the jab gets underway. And later, unrest in Haiti continues after the assassination of their president, but still little is known about the suspected masterminds and their motivation for the deadly attack.
This is our operation CEA. Everybody go, continue go. Everybody do not do.
Good evening, thanks for joining us this Sunday. Make sure you do stay tuned to the very end of this bulletin for a pretty big announcement, not about 6 News in general, but about myself. But first tonight, millions of people across Greater Sydney, Wollongong, Shell Harbour, the Central Coast and the Blue Mountains were all set to end their lockdown yesterday. But as we've seen today, COVID-19 case numbers are continuing to rise. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has now warned that unless vaccination rates improve in the state, thousands of people will be hospitalised and potentially die. Meanwhile, restrictions have eased in a number of other states, including the place once dubbed Australia's COVID capital, Victoria. Senior reporter Darby Travers begins our special coverage from Melbourne.
Gladys Berejiklian has warned that COVID-19 case numbers in New South Wales are likely to spike in the next few days, and that unless vaccination rates improve, thousands of people will be hospitalised and potentially die. Authorities have now announced tighter restrictions for Greater Sydney, Wollongong, the Central Coast and the Blue Mountains, including outdoor public gatherings being limited to 2 people, browsing in shops and supermarkets prohibited, and funerals limited to 10 people in total. Over 47 people are currently in hospital with 16 in ICU, including a teenager. 5 of those people are also on a ventilator. The New South Wales Premier has now faced criticism from some who say she introduced restrictions too late and they weren't tough enough, especially when compared to what was in place in Melbourne for a large part of last year.
If you truly love your parents, your sisters, your best friends, please stick to the rules. Every time you consider breaking the rules, doing something wrong, you are affecting not just you, your closest family, your closest friends, but all of us who are subjected to the lockdown. I know that when all of us come together, we can make a difference. And we need to make that difference by also holding our friends and others accountable.
Interstate Tasmanian authorities have released several exposure sites after a hospital worker who tested negative to COVID-19 returns a positive test when arriving home in London, with the full list on the state's public health website. Here in Victoria, the AFL is pushing for more people to be allowed inside stadiums while the majority of teams remain here. Currently, outdoor stadiums are able to have 75% capacity as part of these restrictions, which also includes masks no longer required at schools for both students and staff, or at workplaces if you don't make contact with the public in Melbourne. North Melbourne will play West Coast in Perth tomorrow night after the WA government decided to allow 100% capacity at Optus Stadium. Border restrictions with New South Wales remain tight though, with fears that if the virus came into state, Melbourne could be facing a 5th lockdown.
New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has rejected claims that ramped up police patrols in southwest Sydney are discriminatory. Close to 200 police officers have been deployed across a number of suburbs to target people not abiding by lockdown measures, but the extra authorities are prompting claims on social media that it's discriminatory and targeting people based off their race. which the Premier rejects.
Right throughout this pandemic, and indeed in the last 2 weeks or so, particularly in southwest Sydney, the vast majority of people do the right thing, absolutely have done the right thing. So what we're asking is for that community, all communities across New South Wales, to work with police, to understand their responsibilities, to share that responsibility. And particularly in southwest Sydney, where there might be some barriers to what people can and can't do, we would really ask family and friends to explain it to those people, what's required of them.
Authorities also say that a team of multicultural police and liaison officers are also operating in southwest Sydney. International travellers arriving in Australia are set to be asked which vaccine they've received and where they were given it. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has confirmed that the new rules will come into effect this coming Friday, while for those trying to leave the country, authorities say there will be a strong preference for them to have had the jab.
There's not a country in the world other than Israel that has a vaccination rate of 2 doses more than 65%. Israel is the only country in the world that has that. Now, in Australia, the number of cases we have had in our community means that, say, compared to the United Kingdom, which had as many cases in one day this week as we've had in 18 months. So there's far more antibodies that exist in, say, in the UK in the general population than in Australia, and that's thankfully so.
State and Territory leaders have also agreed to establish a home quarantine trial for fully vaccinated travellers in South Australia, days after confirming a 4-phase plan that includes fully vaccinated travellers being able to enter Australia without quarantining at all. Overseas now, the Centres for Disease Control and Prevention reports that the Delta variant is now the dominant COVID strain in the US. According to NBC, it made up just 30% of COVID cases in the country 2 weeks ago, but now it accounts for almost 52% of new infections. Studies have shown that vaccines are still effective against multiple variants, including Delta. In addition to America, the variant has been detected in over 100 countries, including Australia, which of course has now led to the Sydney lockdown. US correspondent Jackson Gosnell has more.
Leo, we're monitoring many stories here in the U.S., including the contagious Delta variant. The Delta variant of the coronavirus is now the dominant strain here in the United States, and health officials say it's more contagious than the traditional variant that we've seen. They say that it is responsible for more than half of new reported coronavirus cases. Now, health officials continue to advise for people to get the vaccine, but some interesting news on the vaccine front. Pfizer says they are wanting to ask for the okay to produce a third dose of their vaccine in order to give people more antibodies to prevent disease outbreak, in terms of the vaccinated people. The FDA and CDC pushed back to that, saying it's not needed yet, and it told Pfizer to kind of hold on while they're researching more about it. Now, we do know that this new variant is responsible for a lot of hospitalizations, especially among those who are unvaccinated. Earlier this week, the White House announced that they plan on doing door-to-door community outreach in order to reach people who have not yet been vaccinated. It's unclear how they would determine who was and was not vaccinated. They said they would not be using any sort of data, but we do know that a lot of Republican governors pushed back to that, especially in the state of South Carolina, where I am at. The governor sent a letter to the Department of Health saying that was not welcomed and he did not think it was a good idea. They responded saying essentially they're not going to be doing it, and that it would only be for people who kind of ask for an appointment for someone to come by and get them up to date as far as knowledge regarding the vaccines. So the Delta variant causing a lot of problems, vaccine rollout still going strong. We do have a large portion of the country vaccinated, but of course, those Republican states typically don't have as much vaccine support. They have a lot of vaccine hesitancy, so a lot of GOP lawmakers and leaders are trying to encourage more of those people to get vaccinated. Certainly unclear why that could be, because We do know that President Trump, former President Trump, was responsible for Operation Warp Speed, which really pushed getting that vaccine out. So there are a lot of Republicans opposed, as I'm sure you know, a very small percentage of Democrats opposed here in the United States. So a lot going on as it relates to the coronavirus, but hopefully schools will be opening soon as we head back into school season from the summer in just about a month. We'll continue to keep an eye on everything from right here in the U.S. I'm Jackson Gosnell reporting.
China has accused Australia of meddling in Papua New Guinea's vaccination efforts. State media has alleged that Aussie consultants in PNG have engaged in, quote, political manipulation and bullying, and a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson warned the federal government to stop interfering with and undermining vaccine cooperation between China and Pacific Island countries. Papua New Guinea has recorded over 17,000 COVID cases and just over 170 deaths since the pandemic began, but has only administered around 55,000 vaccine doses due to a combination of lack of supply and hesitancy caused by some misinformation online, including bizarre claims that the jab will turn you into a robot or a zombie. Of course, it does not. To other news tonight, and media staff for the Australian Border Force ignored the privacy of 501 deportees by providing their names to a Channel 9 journalist, according to a new report from the New Zealand Herald. They say that journalist Jordan Fabris wrote to the ABF's media office in January seeking an exclusive story on the deportation flights for, quote, when ratings fire up again. The ABF media unit email reportedly included video files that showed the face of the deported New Zealanders, with Peter Dutton describing the situation in the Channel 9 report as taking out the trash. The 9 report also used the footage without identifying the ABF as the source, with Fabris naming the deportees as they were led to waiting aircraft. Ukraine has claimed that Russian hackers are behind a new cyber attack on its Navy website. The country's defence ministry says the attackers are linked to the authorities across the border and claims they published fake reports about the International Sea Breeze 2021 military drills. According to Reuters, Ukraine has previously accused Russia of orchestrating online attacks as part of a hybrid war against them, which Russia denies. Well, a political assassination was the last thing Haiti needed right now, but as we all know, on Thursday, a group of gunmen stormed the president's home, killing him and wounding his wife. Haiti's history is marred by violence, slavery and political instability, and there are fears tonight that the assassination could further destabilise this volatile Caribbean nation. Chief Reporter Connor Aforke breaks down the complex political environment of America's poorest nation and what these developments mean on a global scale.
Just who assassinated Haitian President Jovenel Moïse and why remain murky questions 72 hours after his death. Haiti's interim Prime Minister has declared a state of siege and 2 weeks of national mourning as the country contends with all emotions. Questions over how this could happen inside the presidential palace, the very home of Moïse. This unverified footage may give some insight. It shows a group of armed men purporting to carry out a DEA operation, Biden denying DEA involvement. Haiti's ambassador to Washington says they were professional mercenaries. In the coming days, heads of security, those charged with protecting the president, will be interrogated. As an urgent cross-border manhunt continues, police brought these suspects before the media. They're among a total of 28 suspects either wanted, detained or dead over the president's gruesome murder. It's alleged Moïse was shot 12 times, sustaining bullet wounds to his forehead and torso. A magistrate said his left eye had also been gouged out. Officials say his killers were heavily armed and highly trained. The hunt is on for the masterminds behind the assassination. As for the motive, that is currently unclear.
Today we presented these assassins to the population. There were 26 of them, we captured 17, among them 15 Colombians. We identified them with their Colombian passports. There are 2 Haitian Americans among those captured.
President Moise's tenure had become increasingly controversial. He had planned to alter the constitution to give himself more power and prolong his administration. There were widespread protests over his refusal to step down when some had claimed his 5-year term had ended. Haiti, the poorest country in the Americas, buffeted by natural disasters and political turmoil, now without a president, without a working parliament. Haitians are said to be confused as to who is in charge, with two men both claiming to be. Haiti has a history of political instability, coups, repression, violence, invasions. The last time a Haitian president was assassinated was in 1915, and there was widespread unrest. That led to the US military occupation of Haiti, in an attempt, they said, to prevent anarchy.
It's very worrisome about the state of Haiti.
Does the US have a role in seeking justice?
Political assassinations tend to ebb and flow over time, according to experts. There are fears this could be the beginning of a resurgence.
As California's lockdown restrictions ease this weekend, the state is seeing a rise in people returning pets to animal shelters and adoption centres. Surrenders of dogs especially have risen sharply because some owners in poorer communities have lost income or their homes during the pandemic, while others no longer have time to care for them now that they're back to in-person work. Authorities say 1.5 million shelter animals are sadly euthanized every year in the US, and there's fears that number could rise by the end of the year compared to pre-pandemic levels. TikTok is rolling out a new system that will allow the company to block videos that violate its policies the moment they're uploaded, according to a new report from Axios. They claim it will reduce the number of distressing videos that its safety team manually reviews, so they can instead focus on videos that may contain hate speech, bullying, and harassment. TikTok will also start to send an in-app warning to users that their content violates their rules and could result in a full account ban. But critics say the rules are going to make it harder for people like activists or campaigners who are trying to raise awareness of serious issues. For example, words like gun, kill, die, and other non-swear words can be flagged as containing graphic content and bullying and harassment, despite not actually having it, leading to some users having to self-censor to avoid detection. And of course, don't forget to follow us on TikTok. Just search 6NewsAU to find us. A tiny dwarf cow has drawn huge crowds in Bangladesh despite the country's coronavirus lockdown. Take a look at this. Rani is 66 centimetres long and weighs only 26 kilograms and has understandably drawn massive numbers of people eager to see it despite the nationwide COVID restrictions. Authorities have reportedly asked the farm's owner to restrict the tourist influx in case of an outbreak. It's also understood that the Guinness Book of Records will be making a ruling in 3 or less months to confirm whether Rani is indeed the smallest cow in the world. And now is Ivan and Sarah with a look at what's coming up later tonight on WAMN News.
Thanks, Leo. Coming up on WAMN News, rising tensions and a lack of trust between police and the firearm industry leads to further questions on accountability. A WAMN News exclusive.
Back to freedom for Western Australia as Stage 5 restrictions kick in again.
On thin ice, a Perth ice rink at risk as business remain impacted by COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions.
Heavy downpours set to hit Perth and southern shores, plus Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WAMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Alright, thanks both Ivan and Sarah there. Now to tomorrow's forecast right across the country. Brisbane partly cloudy, a top of 20, 17 in Sydney, 12 degrees in the nation's capital, 14 in Melbourne, 13 in Hobart, light rain and 15 in Adelaide, 27 in Alice Springs, 19 in heavy storms in Perth, and in Darwin a warm top of 33. And finally tonight, as I teased a bit earlier, I've got a bit of a personal announcement to make. As you all know, I'm a bit younger than your average reporter, and as such, I'm still in high school. Shocker, I know, along with about half of our team. And like with all school years, we have a school camp which goes for 4 days, 3 nights this Tuesday. Now, the only reason I bring this up is because on the camp we cannot have any electronics for the entire time there, basically meaning that I won't be available to report on news or even look at your messages from Tuesday to Friday night at all. But We have to remember this isn't Leo Puglisi News. This is 6 News, and we are an entire team of young journalists. It's not just me. It really hasn't been me since mid last year. So please make sure you're following 6 News AU on all the socials, following our brand new podcast on Spotify and Apple, subscribing to us on YouTube, and donating just $4 a month on Patreon for a world of exclusive benefits, including early access to important announcements like this one. In fact, everything you are hearing me say right now in terms of this personal announcement was there on Patreon for subscribers yesterday, and that's the same with last week's announcement about Press Gallery and Uncensored. Along with our official 6 News AU account, you can also follow our reporters on Twitter. Just go to 6newsau.com/our-team for links to their accounts. Again, you will see the exact same amount of independent and unbiased reporting next week, just without me there. So if you've got any questions about this at all, please don't hesitate to email us as soon as possible. contact@6newsau.com. And that is 6 News for this Sunday evening. You can stay up to date with the latest headlines by heading to our website, 6newsau.com, and by following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Lit. Just search 6 News AU to find us. We're getting notifications already. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company, and I will see you back here on Friday night. Good night.